A few years ago, while island hopping in Thailand, I met a man named Boon Nam who offered me the chance to make some easy money. It sounded straightforward enough. The next day, him and his crew were headed on a research excursion, and they needed an extra pair of hands to help with the equipment. He said that he would pay me 6,000 baht for a few hours' work. The only condition was I had to keep it quiet. First thing in the morning, I loaded the boat with Boon Nam and 2 other guys. Then we were off. After an hour or so of riding the waves, we arrived at the entrance to a water-filled cave in the side of a huge sea stack and started unloading equipment. Boon Nam, he handed me a snorkel, a life vest, some flippers, and a flashlight. All I had to do was stay close and hold the light steady while they managed a huge underwater camera attached to a floating rig. We swam through a labyrinth of tunnels, illuminated only by flashlights. Every so often, Boon Nam asked me to focus on a specific point while the 3 men spoke in Thai and filmed the cavern walls. Curious about what they were shooting, I searched along the wall, and for a brief moment, I saw something wriggling. That freaked me out, so I looked away and I swam closer to the group. Boon Nam, he guided us along a tunnel that opened into daylight. But before we got through, one of the men started to yell. I pointed my light underwater. His foot, it was tangled in some sort of luminous string. It looked like blue strands of floating rope. Boon Nam submerged himself to get a closer look, but as he did, the threads wriggled and slid up around the man's leg. He cried in pain as they coiled and dug into his skin. Boon Nam grabbed his arms and pulled. The string pulsated and ripped into his thigh. It looked like he'd been flayed. Boon Nam finally let go. The man tried to pull the strands off himself, but they looped around his hands and wrenched him backward. We watched, helplessly, as he was dragged into the darkness, screaming. Before we could say or do anything more, glowing strings drifted through the water, cutting off the way back to the boat. All 3 of us swam toward the light as they followed us through the tunnel. The exit led back to a small beach, enclosed by rock walls within the sea stack. They had to be 50 feet high at least. Boon Nam and the other man, they argued in Thai while I fell to my knees and had something of an anxiety attack. They were hard to see in the light, but floating through the water, we could just make out translucent threads extending toward the beach. Every so often, one would wash up on shore like a jellyfish. It would wither and twist on the sand and then get washed away by the next wave. Boon Nam said we had only one option: climb. Each of us attempted to scale the wall, but none of us could make it to the top. At the halfway point, there was nothing to grip onto. It was like being trapped in a huge bowl. We gave up, and for the rest of the day, sat under the searing heat, trying to come up with another plan. At dusk, the threads shimmered and were much easier to spot. As the tide rose and the beach shrank, they drifted closer and closer. Before long, the sand disappeared entirely, and we were forced to stand on jagged rocks at the foot of the wall. Waves washed strands onto the smaller rocks just a few meters away. And all three of us, we again started climbing. We got up the wall just in time. Down below, a strong wave crashed over the rocks and left the threads on top squirming. From up high, the surface of the water looked like it was covered in a shining spiderweb, bopping up and down. We stopped at the point none of us could make it past before, hesitant to risk a fall. We climbed horizontally toward a section of rock that let us lean forward with our arms stretched overhead, and we hugged the wall for hours. My legs burned and my fingers ached. It had been so long since I'd had a drink. My mouth was bone dry. Staying awake became a challenge. Overcome with delirium, I wanted to let go. At any moment, I might have passed out, falling to the chop below. Just when I thought that I couldn't stay awake another second, the man beside Boon Nam lost his footing. He slid off the wall and plunged into the water. When he rose to the surface, it looked like he'd been caught in a net. Strands writhed and twisted all over him, ripping into his skin. I didn't want to let go anymore. The more he flailed, the more entangled he became. And then he was dragged toward the dark cave like a fish on a line. Boon Nam screamed in Thai, pointed downward, pushed off the wall, and dropped into the water. As he swam for the tunnel, I realized his plan. The strands, they had coiled up to encase the man that fell, leaving just enough space to get out. By the time I figured it out, Boon Nam had already disappeared. There was no time to waste. I took a deep breath and I let go. I rose to the surface and started swimming. The man that fell reached out to me and cried for help. I swam past him into the tunnel. Countless strands floated through the water and lit up the cave like a Christmas tree. The glow revealed clusters of shivering black nodes surrounding deep, wavy cracks that the strands extended out of. The cracks convulsed open and shut like clams. I realized they were the mouths of horrible creatures embedded in the walls. Waves pushed me toward them. They held open as I drew near. Kicking with all my might, I fought the current to stay away. Moonlight shone through an opening in front of me. I didn't have much further to go. Even more cracks opened like they were ready for dinner. Up ahead, a network of threads blocked my exit, leaving only the smallest of gaps to slip through. Kicking off a rock, I stretched out my arms, straightened my body, dove underwater, and shot through like a torpedo. Threads followed me as I swam along. Every muscle in my body wanted to quit, but I forced myself to keep going. The next thing I remember was climbing the ladder back onto the boat. I got halfway up when the engine started and we pulled away from the cave. I collapsed on the bow and passed out. Boon Nam shook me awake when we were back at our departure point. He handed me 12,000 baht, double the agreed amount, and he reminded me to keep quiet and shooed me away. Part of me wanted to stay. Questions about what happened raced through my mind, but I was tired, in shock, and dehydrated. I took the money and ran. The next day, I caught the first flight home. So listen, if you're ever in Thailand, go out and see the sights. Check out the amazing floating markets. Visit the breathtaking temples and enjoy the stimulating nightlife that Bangkok offers. But whatever you do, just make sure to stay the hell away from the caves.